Well, I got my hackles up, that's for sure.
Mm. Oh, yeah, I think it's nonsense. But anyway, some people we'll talk about it on the podcast. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Hi, guys, and welcome to episode 23. We've got some very conflicting topics to cover today. We are covering legacy versus hustle, the clash between farming generations, why the tension, and we're also covering livestock truck rollovers. Who's responsible? Is there a need for a national plan? But before
Hi, welcome to Absolutely Fabulous. My name is Gillian Fennell, also known as Station Mum 101. I love everything about agriculture, especially the people and especially communicating about what makes Australian ag so special.
And I'm Katja Williams, a beef, cattle and cropping farmer from Dubbo, New South Wales. And I love all things ag, and I'm also known as the ultimate farm wife. Together, we are absolutely fabulous, and we are talking all things agriculture beyond the headlines.
And we can't wait to give our opinion to you, and we hope you enjoy it.
So let's get into today's episode. But before we jump into those topics, let's have some chit chat. Gillian, what's happened on station this week?
Well, I haven't been on station this week. I have been away, and nobody could guess where I was because obviously I didn't give you too many tips, but I was in Adelaide for some board meetings and for a little bit of other stuff that I've been doing down there. Got home Friday evening, spent the weekend recovering, catching up on washing, etc., and now back at home for a week before I pop off to Western Australia for the very first time next week. So that'll be lots of fun.
Oh, that's exciting. What's in Western Australia?
I am speaking about succession at the Western Australian Lot Feeders Association conference. So that's going to be a really meaty discussion.
Absolutely, it will be.
And what have you been up to, Katja? How's everything? Sleeping now? Got some rest? Caught up?
I have had some rest. I was very grateful. My sister gave me 2 hours the other day, which she had to jump in the car and drive just over an hour to get here. So very grateful for that. And so had more sleep this week. The boys, sorry, I should say the kids' asthma is back under check. I think it was definitely a dietary trigger, as well as maybe the change in the season as well. They just both happened to come in at once. So that's fantastic. I went to an event in Narromine for the National Women's Day celebrations. It's called Gather. It was put on by one of the brand new business collectives over there. So that was a lot of fun. It was a great turnout, and we had some fantastic speakers. So I'm looking forward to when they put their next event on, or even if it's something that I mark in the calendar for next year.
Did you do the cheeky thing and while you were there with that big group of women hand out flyers for your conference that's happening next month? Because that's what I would do. I'll be handing out things saying, "Oh, great to see you here. I'll see you in Dubbo next month. It's going to be great." That's it. got to get the hustle going.
I had flyers in my car, and I did have a little bit of a nervous moment before I went in, because I was turning up not knowing anyone else who was there. So I just thought, no, I'll leave them in my car and I'll just do some networking and I'll chat to some people. And I hung posters in the front foyer.
That's why you need your kids to be a bit older, because then they could be out there sticking them under people's windscreen wipers in the car park while you're inside.
That's what I should have done. But they organised 2 buses. So because there were alcoholic beverages involved in the long lunch, the committee was very responsible and they organised buses. So what I should have done is flyed the seats in the buses.
Yeah. Next time. All right, we better get into it, because we've got a couple of big topics this week.
We do. So our first topic is legacy versus hustle. This is a topic which gets people's hackles up, and people are so passionate about, one, you've gone out on your own and you've hustled and you've really put so much blood, sweat and tears into establishing your first generation farm and growing your business. And then they seem to develop a bit of a chip on their shoulder against generational farmers. And I think generational farmers sometimes get offended by that, particularly when they use the term when describing a generational farmer as, well, you were given the place. And I know that doesn't sit well with me. I'm a generational farmer. Gillian, you're a generational farmer. Oh my goodness, my hackles get up when they use that phrase. It's something I'm truly passionate about. Please stop using that phrase. A farm is never given to you.
No, because anyone will know that if you do end up having a successful succession plan, you haven't been given shit. You have the right to take over the management of that asset. And the way most businesses are structured these days, that's all you get, because the assets are held in a trust and you get the company which runs those assets. That's what you actually get to be in control of. The land, the assets and everything remain separate. So we're not in the 1800s anymore. The eldest son doesn't automatically inherit on the death of the father. It's a very complex thing. And this attachment or this ego-driven thing about, well, the number of places I've been and people I've been introduced to, it's like, well, I'm an 8th generation sheep farmer, so I don't fucking care. Are you any good at it? Like, just because you've been doing something for a long time doesn't mean you're really good at it. Like, have you increased, decreased, stayed the same? Like, what have you done? How many of your family members still talk to you? Like, there's many, many ways to measure success rather than just doing something for a very long time. And it's the same thing on the flip side for people who may not have that family connection to agriculture. And you're right, they do hustle and they do work hard to get what they are and start out with an adjustment herd or with leasing or sharecropping, all these sorts of things, all these different pathways in. And eventually they do end up owning their own bit of land. And that is hard work too. There's hard work on both sides of the ledger. And instead of saying, oh, well, we're so hard done by before because no one gave us anything. And I hear a lot of people who say that, and I know it's bullshit, because I do know that they were actually given stuff. They just like to pretend that they did it all by themselves, but it's we're all in the same industry. So why do we need to tear each other down with, well, look, I'm a 7th generation farmer on the Murray-Darling, so my opinion is far more valuable than yours, who've only been here for 2 seconds. And okay, so you've been doing it for, I don't know, 100 years. Why is it such a mess then if you're so good at it? Like, there's all these different ways to look at it. It's interesting how we tie our identity up in that and how we use that to promote ourselves and then to put other groups of the industry down. It's very much like I'm an organic chicken egg laying producing farmer who only feeds my chickens the most biodynamic grain produced by the small elves that live under the mountains, so my produce is obviously better than your mass-produced, terrible welfare. It's like there's production systems for everybody. I don't tear down other people in order to build. If yours is genuinely better, then say mine's better because it's got more omega-3 or whatever, but don't say I'm better because I've been doing it for longer, or yours is rubbish. And that's the thing I don't like. Well, you're rubbish because X. Nah, come on. Rubbish exists everywhere, and so do good practitioners, whether they're 1st gen or 10th gen. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you see it a lot? Because you're in very closely settled country, aren't you, Katja? Like, you'd probably see that we used to call them, what do we call them? Silvertails. That's like the landed gentry type version of the Australian aristocracy. We call them the Silvertails, or Nawabs was the another old saying that they used to be called. Squatocracy. Do you have a few of those around?
I have never heard them called that. I think that's the difference between your state and mine, or even our generations.
This is all from Queensland, because where I grew up in Queensland, it was very much the sheep people, because I came from a very heavy merino wool producing area. There was the sheep people with they'd been there since 1800s. They'd settled the country, blah, blah, blah. And then when the cattle people moved in, it was like, oh my God, it was just like the War of the Roses. It was just like there was two very different groups of people with two very different ways of doing things. And they spoke differently, they dressed differently. It was incredible, actually. But now they've all intermarried and everything, so everyone's all happy friends again. But yes, like, oh well, no, they're cattle people, you know. So us genteel sheep producers, we wouldn't have anything to do with those cattle people. The cattle people played rugby league, and the sheep people played tennis and cricket. It was a very interesting place to grow up.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh, I would have been one of those sheep people, only I didn't play tennis. And I married a couple. I think because where I am in Central West New South Wales, there's still a few quite big places, but the majority of places are under a couple of thousand acres. And a lot of the smaller blocks, when you're looking at under 500, under 200, are very close to town, and which means the prices are very expensive. So it's kind of one of those things where if you are going to be a first generation farmer, you either buy an expensive small block close to town, or you have to take a bigger bite of the piece and go for guns for the bigger property further out west. To be able to get your foot in the market. And I think that initial kicking off point is like any small business, those first steps are going to be hard. And I think even with the next generation coming through, even if you're a generational farmer, if you're wanting to do something for yourself, if you're wanting to take the next step instead of waiting for your dad to pass away to get the place, then, because that's still traditionally how it happens. I'm not saying that's how it happens in all places, but traditionally speaking, back in the old day, you're gonna try and take those investments on yourself. So then I wonder whether some of the more recent clashes is because the multi-generational farmers are not wanting to wait until dad dies, which is now, after their 60s. Like most of our parents are living till 60s, 70s, 80s, 100s. We've had some grandparents live to 100, so not on my side of the family, on my husband's side of the family. So great blood I've married into. But they're not wanting to wait that long. Whereas before, the generation and handover of the property was in their 40s and 50s. And now, because of healthcare and modern society, we're living longer. So instead of waiting and waiting to then actually not really be able to have much of a say in the direction of the farm and basically passing it on straight on to the next generation because you want them to have a fair crack, because we're in it not only because we love it, because we want to hand it over to the next generation or whoever wants to look after the land once we're gone, and we're not inheriting it until our 40s, 50s, 60s, then I think that new generation farmers, particularly in our area, are now competing with first generation farmers for those smaller blocks. So I think that's where a bit of a chip on the shoulder and the battle comes into play as well. And I also think that there's I'm a millennial, and even the generation below me are wanting to start, I think, on a bigger place, on a bigger property, and start with everything being pretty schmick and running pretty well, and going towards more those Pinterest style farming. Well, come on, guys, you've got to be realistic. You've got to start small. You've got to start with your secondhand stuff. Like, work with your budget. You don't have to have everything squeaky brand new and squeaky clean and beautiful. Like, if you're gonna go around the back of Bunnings and collect the pallets and make your chicken coop out of that, and hustle small, build it up. Start small. It's not only going to be helpful for you in building your skills as you go, but you're also not going to get up to, 1,000 chooks and then go, oh my goodness, what am I doing with 1,000 chooks? I've got no market to sell my eggs. I've got none of this. I've got none of that. Oh my gosh, I've got avian influenza, and they've had to take out the whole stuff. And that's a couple of, thousands to a mil that's gone in one lot because I didn't have my biosecurity under control. Start small, chip away at it. And I think that's advice for whether you're a generation farmer or a first generation farmer. And for our urban listeners, I did want to clarify, just in case you have no idea what we're talking about, as Gillian said before, generational farmers are who have been farming for a long time, and the farm or the enterprise passes from one generation to the next. First generation farmers are mostly removed from the farm. So they might be coming from a city or a rural background and they're starting farming, or they could be stepping out on their own, which I think needs a category of its own, really, Gillian, because you're not really a first generation farmer if you're stepping out on your own, but you also don't have the backing of the farmer. So what do you think they should be called? Because I think that should be a third category on its own.
And that, yeah, you're right. I think that does deserve a third category, because there is that, especially like, so back in the old days, they're the thirds or the second or third son who would have entered into land draws and all those sorts of things. They're from a farming family, but they knew they had no chance of inheriting, so they had to that's why a lot of young rural men signed up to go to World War I and II, because it was the start of their dream. They had no real burning desire to go overseas and kill people, but they're like, if this is this, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand about agriculture. A lot of people in agriculture today, their immediate past ancestors were willing to go and run the risk of dying or being horribly maimed for their opportunity to have their own land. So when we say our identity is tied to the land and it's part of us, we're not fucking about. We were literally willing, and our families were willing to put their lives on the line to achieve that dream. And
that's because when they came back, what did the government give them as a return for their service?
Yes, they were allowed to get a soldier's block, which a lot of people couldn't make any money out of because they were too small and they were in terrible areas, which was a terrible disgrace by the government, to sort of shortchange people who willingly went to serve their nation and in the Commonwealth and were repaid with trash. But that's another discussion. But there is an element there of people who are like, I can't wait for dad to die. I want to do my own thing now. And so they are hustling, but they do have the benefit, I guess, of generations of expertise, whereas some brand new entrants into agriculture don't have that benefit of being familiar with how things work, of being familiar with livestock, with cropping, with anything like that, because they are brand new entrants. And I think that's where we see a lot of the friction, that people who think they know best get really, really upset when people who actually do know what they're doing but still don't have the same access to capital. There's that friction that exists there. And so it's like, oh, well, you're just here inheriting this and you're inheriting that. I know a lot of people in agriculture who are gradually making their way and are successful and are doing their own thing, who did not inherit shit. It's just sheer hard work, but they do come from an agricultural background. And so they do need another name. And so if our listeners wanted to try and come up with a name, what could you call those group of people? Because it is hard. It's hard to do anything. Everything is hard. And to try and knock other people down because you've got a massive chip on your shoulder, don't be like that. Don't do that, guys. That's no.
Yeah.
Don't. And don't try and leverage it into a personality or a platform or something by saying, well, I'm a this and I'm obviously doing X, Y, and Z because I'm better because I've done this. It's like, no, don't do that.
Do you think it's always existed, Gillian, or do you think it's now more prevalent because people are trying to establish their own personal brands and tell their story, but not well?
I think it's probably more prevalent now. We're just noticing it more because people are promoting themselves, because they want that, whether it's their long-term marketing plan, so they're going to market their produce built on their personal brand, or they're using their personal brand as a way to attract investors or attract attention to their brand or their produce or whatever. But I think it's always happened, because there's always been, even where I lived, and even we cop it in the pastoral areas here in South Australia, established pastoralists who've been there for generations, been here for 150, 160 years. If someone new buys into the pastoral areas, it's like, oh, well, that fella doesn't know what he's doing. He's never lived in this land before. He doesn't know what it's about. And it might be true, or it might be he's a really switched on operator. So, just judging people by what generation they are or how long they've been somewhere is probably not a good way to go about things. Wait and see if they fuck up first. They might be no good. You might be right, but yeah, just withhold your judgment a little bit, because they might bring innovation and new ideas into your district, and that could really benefit you and your farm. Yeah, I think trying to build a brand off the back of running someone else down, I think, is probably not great. And if you're doing that, stop it.
It's not going to get you far. And I really think that's probably the message that we should leave this topic on, Gillian. I think you're absolutely right there. And that is, be kind. There is enough prejudice against farmers as a whole and the agricultural industry. We don't need to be internally fighting. I think why it gets my hackles up so much is, I think, please be nice, please be respectful, and respect everybody else's journey. Because as we've said, both sides are hustling. Both sides are hard. The dynamic is different. The end goal is usually the same. And there's hardships on both sides. Please be respectful. Stop using terms and they were given it or we earned it. Like, be respectful. Be nice to each other, because you'll need each other in the future. And if there is someone who's new to the area, whether they're experienced, whether they're generational farmers, whether they're first-time farmers, whether that middle category that we need a name for, get along with each other. Because, you know, when it comes to fire, when it comes to flood, when it comes to other natural disasters, when it comes to, I don't know, the next recession, or when it comes to, oh my gosh, my tractor has done a bearing and I don't know how to fix it, maybe your neighbour will. Or, oh, the mechanic can't get out to fix that for a couple of weeks because it's sowing season and everybody wants that mechanic. Well, okay, if you ask your neighbour really nicely, if he's finished sowing or he's finished ploughing, you might be able to borrow his damn tractor or lease it from him. But you need that relationship to start with. So don't burn your bridges before you start it. I think that's somewhere we should leave this conversation. So, Gillian, that takes us to the mid of our episode. And this part of the episode is sponsored by Farm Table. So thank you, Farm Table. Farm Table now hosts our podcast page, our landing page. So I will add that in the show notes below for you all to check out. But welcome to Farm Table. Farm Table is a proud independent Australian agricultural knowledge platform, bringing together the most relevant and curated agricultural resources from around the globe. More than that, Farm Table supports industry collaboration, peer-to-peer networking, and functions to build the capacity of individuals and organisations across the entire Australian ag supply chain. With over 3,000 resources, the latest agricultural events, funding opportunities, grants, micro courses and workshops, all in one location. Farm Table makes it easier to find the information you need. So do we have a Ag Fab of the Week?
We do. We do have an Ag Fab of the Week, and her name is Lara Jensen, and she is from Western Australia, and she has been campaigning for decades to see lights put on rolling stock on trains due to a tragedy that they had in their community and within her family. And it's a pretty simple fix, actually, to put lights on train carriages, but somehow no one wants to do it. Did you know that 80% of rail crossings in Australia do not even have warning lights? And like, people say, well, how can you hit a train? Well, I know a few people actually who've driven straight into the side of the train because it's dark, the trains are dark, you can't hear anything, you're inside the cab of your machine or in your Toyota or whatever. It's surprisingly easy, and it's because it's so many different things go into this, but a very, very simple way to stop people driving into the sides of trains would be to put lights on them. Lights are not expensive these days. They can be solar powered, they can be LED, they can last for ages, and yet for some reason the government will not make rail companies light up their rolling stock, and that's a disgrace. So Lara is our Ag Fab of the Week. She's been advocating hard for that. She has a Facebook page where she is encouraging people to write to the government of Western Australia in particular, and also to the newspaper in Western Australia for people to register their dismay and disgust at why this has never happened. So Lara, you're our Ag Fab of the Week, and we will highlight your campaign on our socials this week. So thank you very much for the hard work that you're doing on behalf of everyone who lives in regional Australia and has unlit rolling stock and unlit rail crossings. There is a lot of them. So thank you, Lara.
I think there's definitely a lot of them, and there's a lot of them that runs through rural properties at night too. So not just on our roads, but also through our properties. So I think that's really important, and I really think there should be actually a petition going on that as well.
Yeah, so Lara had a petition that went to the Western Australian Parliament because that's where her particular issue occurred. But this is a national issue. Like the state of our transport networks in Australia and how sad they are and how unregulated they are is disgraceful. Like there's more regulation on putting lights on your bicycle than there is putting lights on trains and like we have a road train. It has got more lights than a Christmas tree, honestly. So if we have to do it, why don't trains have to do it? Like why do trains keep getting all these special exemptions when they are just as dangerous as big trucks? Like it's crazy. It's not that hard. Just do it. It's like everything else that is a problem in regional Australia. It's not that hard. Just do it. It doesn't even cost that much. Oh no, it's not an issue. All right, I will guarantee you I will guarantee in urban areas they have all the proper safety at rail crossings and everything. So again, it's just the regions that miss out.
Any questions on the socials this week?
We haven't had any questions, which is sad because we're giving people our opinion.
Not just in our hour of the podcast, but also over on the socials.
Everywhere. So have you had any questions about your upcoming conference, Katja? Because I did see one thing. People were concerned that because you are having a cocktail party, that there would be that it would just be all booze. But I don't think, like they only have to look at the speakers list to know that that's not what it's about, which is sad.
I ended up having my first lot of haters in my inbox about my event. So these ones were written not face-to-face, and they were sent from an anonymous email account, like a nondescript email account. Yes, I have Shan from Sober in the Country speaking at the event. I am also a non-drinker, just because I am actually allergic to it. It does not agree with my body. And so, yes, the cocktail event, I had to put out two disclaimers over the weekend. The first one is cocktail refers to the dress code, okay, not the beverage of the event. It is cocktail dress. It is a networking event, and it's not a booze fest. It's a networking event to start with. But then also we do have Etch Sparkling at the event, and they will be our non-alcoholic cocktail or soda beverage, sparkling beverage of the conference. So between the dress code being cocktail dress, between having Shanna from Sober in the Country and having Etch Sparkling on board, there will also be other non-alcoholic options. We're not cutting alcohol. Nothing about Sober in the Country and this agricultural event is against booze. It is about having options and about saying that it's okay to say no.
Do you know, over the years, the number of cocktail events that I have been to, and no one has ever given a shit about it being advertised as a cocktail event. So these anonymous cowards, like like it's not hurting you, so who cares? Why are you taking the energy to disparage an event that we're not coming to your house and knocking on your door and forcing you to do something? Is that the only complaint you've had, Katja, or do they have other concerns, these anonymous people?
So the other main concern, which I think we've already spoken about on the podcast, is about particularly older men wanting to be against this women's event in agriculture because they don't think that women need to be empowered. They don't think that we need to be learning skills and spending the farm's money on something that's actually going to personally benefit us. So The conference is about leveraging our skills and empowering ourselves as individuals through that personal development to benefit the farm, because there's a lot of other conferences and a lot of other programs out there specifically for the farm business, but there's nothing behind the person to give the person the confidence that they need to conduct the skills or to learn those skills that aren't common knowledge or haven't been passed on. That's where the event sits. That's the space where we're sitting. So there is a little bit of flack on that, because there still is that stereotype of, well, women should be in the kitchen and they should be supporting their farmer, and they don't need to get off farm and do things for themselves. And that's probably the only other conflict I've had. Yeah, I've been very polite.
Can I read those emails at the start of the conference? Because I reckon that'll set the tone for the whole day.
Well, after we jump off today, I am going to be writing up the run sheet for Alistair Mosey, who is our MC for the event. So I probably will add a couple of those in.
I think we need to read them out and then record the crowd giving their opinion on that particular piece of correspondence, because again, how is it hurting you? And I think this gets down to the core of everything, and you can call it feminism, you can call it female, but it's not hurting you to give someone else skills and empower them to be good at what they do. If you think it's hurting you, then you are obviously a weak, small individual, because making someone better doesn't take away from you, it makes everyone better.
Absolutely. Let's set everyone up for success.
Yeah.
Got to set everyone up for success.
Oh, God almighty. All right, let's move on to our next topic after that nice little step into whatever we want to call that nightmare.
Topic 2 today is sponsored by Jo Marie Designs. Breastfeeding work shirts have redefined the early days of motherhood for the outdoorsy woman. Bringing together everything women love about their work shirts, long sleeves, collars, pockets, and sun protection, they have added a touch of style and made them breastfeeding friendly. Thank you, Jo Marie Designs.
Topic 2, livestock truck rollovers. Who's responsible? What's the right response? And is there a need for a national plan? Absolutely. Yes, there is.
And if you don't know what we're talking about, we'll post it on the socials. There was an incident, I think it was in Victoria, where a livestock truck rolled over, and it just happened to be in a national park or reserve or something. So the Livestock Transporters Association does have a plan of what meant to happen. 2 councils said it's not our drama. The people in control of the park said it's not our drama. And you can't expect the truckie to do anything about it, because he's just tipped his truck over. He's probably in hospital, he or her, whoever's driving the truck. It's just because we do have on the Stewart Highway, which is like the main stretch of highway, there are livestock rollovers. We're a very different scenario because we're a very, very remote area. We don't have a council. And so it is usually, like the case in Victoria, the local farmers step in and take care of it. And the police do also take care of it. It's very concerning to me that it was definitely an animal welfare issue, and AgVic sort of washed their hands of it, and they are supposed to be responsible. Anything over 10 head of production animals, it's their responsibility. The buck should have stopped with them, and they just went, nah. So that is unacceptable. And also, we need to be more aware of what happens in these scenarios, and people need to actually clue up their staff as to what's meant to happen, so you can keep making the right phone calls and make sure you get the right person there on the ground. So yeah, it's a shocker that that sort of thing happened and nobody gave a shit. And we care for our livestock. It was appalling.
And it's not an isolated case either.
No.
There, in this area alone, there has been horse trucks go over, there has been sheep trucks go over, mostly because of the poor roads and the poor upkeep of the roads and the poor signage. Like if you've got a truckie who's driving on a road, whether it's straight or windy, whatever it is, if they have not driven on that road before and it is not signposted correctly or the way that it needs to be for non-locals or even locals to be driving that stretch of road, it is so dangerous. even no, I won't bring that one up. I'll probably cry. Response is absolutely appalling. In one case, which happened with a horse truck rollover quite close to us, it was very lucky that the local large animal vet arrived on scene first. And why I say that was lucky was because of the poor responses in the past. He dropped everything to get on site first, and so did all the local neighbours. As soon as they knew that it happened, they not only coordinated the chopper land to get the driver and the passengers to hospital as soon as possible. The authorities hadn't turned up yet, but also they got most of the horses out of the truck before the authorities got there. Because if they hadn't, whether the animals were injured or not, they would have been put down on the spot.
Yeah.
No, they are somebody's animals, they are somebody's pets, and we absolutely 100% love our animals. And especially when that should not be your first response, to put everything down on spot. Who's financially covering that loss? Why is that the first response?
Yeah. And you do get transport insurance when you're selling through an agent or whatever. You do have transport insurance included for your sheep or your cattle. I don't know about horses. You probably have to cover that insurance yourself unless you're going with like a licensed horse transporter. But it's one of those sorts of things. Emergency response personnel are often not best placed to assess the health and well-being of livestock. That's a specialist area, and that's why AgVic is supposed to do it, because they're meant to have those specialists. Like, for ease of cleanup and everything else, the local copper could get in there and euthanize everything if you felt the compulsion, and you just got to drag dead bodies away. But there's a lot of scenarios where a truck will tip over and the animals will fine. They just need a bit of rest and recovery. So there's all these different things, and it comes down to, again, lack of investment in appropriate infrastructure, lack of investment in training and development of staff, no plans and policies put in place that actually work. This isn't a once-in-a-lifetime scenario. Trucks tip over, whether they're carrying watermelons or pumpkins or livestock, they tip over. It's just what happens. Like, you can't, the state of our roads, it's going to keep happening, to be completely honest. So why aren't we looking at this from a risk management perspective and going, okay, we obviously need to do better. We obviously need to put this in place. And AgVic hasn't made any appropriate response as of yet. They're saying they're having an internal review, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think it's isolated to Victoria. I think all the other states should be taking a long, hard look at their emergency response procedures, because it's just unacceptable.
In this case, I believe the farmer became centre control. And on one hand, I think that's really important because it was his animals. And I really hope that he got the say in rounding them up and what got euthanized and what didn't. I really hope that was the case. Do you think that in like most scenarios, the farmer whose stock it is should become the centre controller, or do you think there's a regulated body who needs someone trained in this to become that person? Because I think he said he got over 30 huge amounts of calls over 2 days about this.
Yeah, it's essentially, that's a volunteer you're asking to do that, and you're asking them to take on immense legal responsibility. So I don't think it is appropriate for just, the farmers whose land's on the boundary of that rollover to take on that role. That's why there needs to be these plans, and there are these plans that for some unknown reason nobody bothered to implement or follow. And you do get, in an emergency situation, you do get a lot of calls, and you have to make a lot of decisions, and people are relying on your information. If you've never been in that situation or had the correct training for that, it's very stressful. And also, you could be doing the wrong thing and inadvertently putting other people's lives at risk. So that's why this is exactly why government's supposed to exist, to take this burden off the individual. Like, that's, one of the roles of the ag department is to do these sorts of things, to respond to these sorts of disasters and accidents. So they need to step up and actually do their job.
Yeah, I don't think it's right to have the farmer in the position when they need to be making these decisions, but also, yeah, legislation wise. Why is it their responsibility to know legislation, especially if it's across the borders? You mentioned livestock insurance. In New South Wales, it's not automatically added. That's something that the farmer has to have. And if they haven't had an issue, particularly when we're talking about multiple generations, if that farm hasn't had an incident before, it's probably not an insurance they're going to be paying.
They'll run the risk because it's a probability, and it's an added cost that some people can't afford at that time. And it's all of these sorts of things. And it's just the actual response and because there's still cattle trotting about the park at the moment. And so next thing you know, it'll be the farmer's fault because there's cattle in the park, where parks were told to come and help retrieve the cattle, and they said no. So it's, no one wants to take responsibility for anything, yet we're happy for volunteers to take on responsibility for other people's lives and livelihoods. Like, that's
And who's
government.
responsible?
You guys are supposed to do it. That's literally your job.
Yeah.
And you want to tell us how many chickens we can keep in our backyard, but you don't want to take responsibility when it's actually your job to do something. It's crazy.
Yeah. And whose responsibility is it if one of those cattle causes an accident in the next coming weeks when he's had no help rounding them up?
Yep. No, it'll be his fault again because he's got unsecured stock wandering around the countryside when they're not on his land anymore. I don't know how far away from home they are. That just.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We transport stock everywhere across this country. It's not fair.
No.
But he should be responsible.
Because once you can, it's this chain of responsibility and all of these sorts of things. And we in the industry know all these things exist. We put them in place voluntarily because we're aware of what could happen. Yet the bodies that are meant to be responsible for administering this and for stepping into the breach when these things do occur, they wipe their hands of it and don't turn up. So it becomes an industry problem again. And it's, if we were sending out, for example, sometimes we send livestock to Roma. So if the truck tipped over near Roma, that's 2,000 kilometres odd away. Like, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. So for those who don't know where Gillian is, that's from northern South Australia across to mid-Queensland.
Yeah, mid-Queensland, give or take.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's just so many, it's just systems failure because people don't want to take responsibility for doing their job. And yes, if AgVic had turned up and had euthanized things that didn't deserve to be euthanized or whatever, or assessed to be then they probably would have been liable for the cost of those animals. But is that worse than letting animals suffer because they don't want to do their job? I don't think it is. Like, someone has to be bold and say, yes, this is our job and this is the decision I made with the information, and very sorry, whatever. Like, you have to do your job.
So basically what we're asking the national plan to cover, one, yes, it is needed, and we would like it to be covered in training emergency livestock response teams, clear euthanasia and animal welfare protocols, better roads and infrastructure, better signage, national guidelines for transport, safety and driver training. I think that needs to be in there as well. And the voices of industry that need to be included are the truck drivers and the companies that are driving livestock. So that first-hand point on the ground, farmers for both, financially and emotionally for that impact. The emergency response needs to be clearly outlined, rolled out and sent to all farms, properties, anyone in New South Wales, we have NLIS. I don't know if you have that too. That's national, I guess. Yeah. Yep. So anyone who is registered for NLIS in cattle should get that. And I believe sheep and goats are starting to turn onto a national tagging system as well. So they should automatically get the update. And animal welfare groups. This is the only time I think they need a voice, but a small voice. They are only part of the conversation. They cannot be the loudest voice in the room because they're not, unless it's coming from the producers on the ground as the animal welfare representatives.
I would rather have the Australian Vets Association than an animal welfare organisation, to be honest, because the animal welfare organisation would be like, well, they shouldn't have been on the truck in the first place. Evil farmers just making money out of these poor beautiful animals. So yeah, I think it's where you need people with actual scientific and practical applications of an experience in this. And you'd be surprised at how much influence the likes of RSPCA has over these sorts of plans, which is frightening. But it's, and I think the biggest thing that fell down here is that a lot of these things already exist, but we've never looked at them in a whole. And if you want to train up local, like livestock emergency response people, don't expect them to do it for nothing. If you ring them at 3 o'clock in the morning and say a truck's gone over, we need you to come down to whoop whoop and be the man on the ground or lady on the ground to assess these animals, pay them for their time, because their time is valuable, and you're leaning on we too often rely on the goodwill of volunteers, and eventually they will get burnt out, and that's where a lot of times these systems fall down, because they have never bothered to look at how they make them sustainable. And all the government employees who didn't bother to turn up, shame on you, because you are getting paid to do your job.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, you let volunteers take the brunt of doing your job for you, which is unacceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, head over to the socials, have your say on the topics that we've discussed today. Leave a 5-star review where you download your podcast, or over on YouTube, send us a comment. Keep sending in your recommendations for discussion topics. We love to hear from you. We'd love to know what's important to you. Anything else, Gillian?
And tell us if we've got it wrong. Honestly. But don't send Katja any more emails about her conference, because I will read them out in public and make you really sad for yourself, because that's when someone's having a go at doing something, don't be like that. There's lots of things that happen in the world that I'm not particularly enamored with, but it's not hurting me. People are just living their best life. Leave people alone.
I'm more than happy to answer questions directly related to the conference and your experience, particularly if you're just wanting to find out a little bit more. But if you're going to be nasty for nasty's sake, there's no place for it in my inbox. I have a nicer approach, as we found out at the NFF workshop we did the other day. My response is nice and polite, or no response at all. Gillian's is more active, and she's in my corner. She's got my back.
I will drag you in public if you send nasty stuff. Like, it's okay to disagree with people, that's fine, but it's what is wrong with you, and what have you so little you have in your life that you have taken the actual time to get your computer or your phone and actually look up an email address and write an email complaining about something that has got literally nothing to do with you. Like, that is insane.
Yeah, there's no ticket against this email address either, so they're not coming.
That's a shame.
Anyway, we will leave it all there. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in another episode.
Bye.